Hey guys, Bia here. So before we start this episode, I just wanted to explain that by this point of the podcast, we had already recorded like 30 minutes of the episode when I realized that, sorry, that's my dog. When I realized that the microphone was off, so we had to start everything from the beginning, and we were just laughing so hard we couldn't stop laughing because it was so funny. That's what's going on at this point. So yeah, enjoy this episode. Dang, I can't believe this! Oh my gosh! I'm gonna restart.
We got this.
Let's do this. Okay, I can't with myself.
There's a sermon coming this week that's gonna apply. Actually, it's not gonna directly apply to this, so never mind. But
What do you mean?
you'll see Sunday.
I won't!
Are you not gonna be here?
I'm traveling back home! Okay, but tell me now then. Because now I wanna know.
It's about patience and suffering. And
basically, we've recorded like a good almost 30 minutes, okay? And I forgot to turn on the mic, so we're gonna start everything again.
I didn't have anything important to say anymore.
Yes, it did. A bunch of things. Oh my gosh.
The Lord is good and faithful.
Oh, He is.
Amen.
It was for a reason.
It was.
This is gonna be funny to us at least.
That's
so
right.
I don't know what you guys are gonna think, but this was hilarious to me. Anyways, welcome to one more episode of the Audience of One podcast. I'm Bia, and I am here with Devon Goins.
Don't mind me.
Oh gosh. And I actually haven't posted in the past 2 weeks, and I'm so sorry about that, but I've had good reasons for that, because the first week, I don't laugh. Because
I'm just
the first week, I had finals, and if you've ever been in college, you know the finals week is insane, so I had no time for anything. And right after that was graduation week, and right after that, we had conference meet here at the school, and we actually won. We won cross country, indoor and outdoor track, so that was so cool. It has never been done in our school before, so our coach was very pumped, and we were very pumped as well. So after that, I also lost my voice for the entire week last week, so I couldn't do this, but now I'm fully healed, so here I am with Devon.
That's right.
Yes, and Devon actually used to wrestle here at the school. And
You gotta say wrestled.
wrestle.
It's wrestling.
I can't say wrestle. We make fun of him all the time, by the way,
It's
about
wrestling.
the way he says wrestle. So he used to wrestle here at the school, and then he worked with sports ministries. He was a GA for wrestling. He was actually, I just found out a few minutes ago, that he was a director in one of the dorms.
I've been all over the place on this campus for this.
And he now works with diversity, and you're the director of diversity, right?
Yep.
That's the word. Yay. I memorized. Thank
Great.
you. And he's also one of the elders at Cornerstone Community Church, which I attend here in Williamsburg, and I love this place so much. So, let's commence again.
I don't know why I'm laughing.
It's just so funny, I can't either.
Oh.
Anyways, tell us a little bit about your testimony, because I just heard about it, but most of them probably don't know your testimony.
No, it's good.
So please share with us, how you came to Christ, and just the whole story.
So I was born in Germany. I lived there till I was 6. I was born in Germany, lived there till I was 6. Neither my parents are Christian. My dad was in the military. My mom's German. It was actually cool. We visited Germany this past Christmas to visit my grandma. So that was really good. Anyway, I don't know if I mentioned, but neither my parents are Christian. So kind of the attitude about Christianity or any kind of faith growing up was more of indifference. My mom was really big on relative truth, and all the time she'd be like, your truth is your truth, what's good for you is good for you. So it wasn't really till we came to the States, again I was 6, and my first friend that I made, their family were Christians, and again I noticed that there was something that was different about them, and it was mainly in the way that the parents dealt with one another, because I don't know. It was just like I knew pretty young. I was like, okay, there's something different. And ultimately, they ended up inviting me to church with them a few times, and I thought that was kind of cool. It was funny because, again, English wasn't my first language. German was. But, yeah.
Sure, that was, kind of a challenge for you.
It was, especially because they had us reading the King James, and I was like...
What is going on?
No offense on the King James.
But it's hard.
Yeah.
I know from a non, like, English speaker.
Right. You're like...
It is harder.
It's the 1600s. But, yeah, so... Anyway, moved to Savannah when I was 9, because my dad was military. We moved every 3 years. Moved to Savannah. I don't remember much anything about Christianity or spirituality, but it wasn't until we moved back up to North Georgia, moved to a place called Dallas, Georgia, excuse me. I had a guy named Justice, who I used to call Mustus. I used to make fun of him, but on a side note, it's been cool. Just as I think back about my story, I think it's been really cool just to talk about the people who were really influential that the Lord used, because in reality, like,
how it sticks with you.
It does, right? And like in reality, like y'all will probably never know Justice or meet Justice, but like that was the Lord's means to reach out to me and to share the gospel with me. And a lot of times it is just one individual who, or not one individual, but like you have these key people in your life that are sharing the truth with you, and I don't know, it's just really cool to think through that. So that's why I wanted to make Justice's name not to make fun of him. But anyway, so yeah, my attitude towards Christianity was more indifference, but I would make fun of Christians a lot of times. I thought they were weird. But yeah, he was just really intentional about sharing the gospel with me. And I love hip-hop, so he was putting me on some Christian hip-hop guys like Lecrae, and it's actually kind of cool. I just recently bought the album Rebel. That was one of the first albums I listened to, and I play it, like I'm playing it in the car right now, and it's just cool to like listen through the lyrics of those songs again and to think back on how pivotal that they were in shaping me at a young age, even before I was even following Jesus. Or had any kind of Christian convictions. It was just really challenging a lot of the assumptions about life that I had. But there's a song named Truth by Lecrae, and I remember listening to it, and I was being really challenged by it because the whole idea of truth was relative to me, and he was calling that out. And I remember playing it in front of my mom, and I was like, what do you think about this? And she's like, that's good for him. And I was like, what? Anyway, so kind of fast forward a little bit, but that was in middle school. Kind of fast forward a little bit, sophomore year of high school, just finished my second wrestling season. Like literally the weekend before we had finished state and stuff, and that next week I ended up getting kicked out of school for possession of marijuana. So I had a drug charge on me, and that was pretty devastating because my whole life I wanted to join the military. I thought that was a means to be able to have some time with my dad, because dad was military, had PTSD, and the way that he dealt with that was to drown himself in work. So I was like, okay, let me have some kind of common factor that I can have with my dad. And so like the drug charge basically threw that all out. And I was like, well, what do I do now, And again, I had some other friends. I didn't mention this last time. But I had another friend who was like, man, like, he's like, you should really start reading the Bible. And the other day, like literally 2 or 3 days ago, I was looking back on like the little concordance in the back where it has the different word, and then it gives you different Bible verses. And literally that's what I would do. I would look up a certain word that I wanted to know about.
Actually kind of smart.
Yeah. And then I would literally just read through every single one of those things. So I did that for a while, but his name was Shannon. But yeah, so Shannon really challenged me with that. But got kicked out on a Friday. That next Friday, one of my boys that I used to kick it with and still kicked it with, he ended up inviting me to this Christian, like a winter camp. And I was like, what's that? But, and I also had to convince my mom to let me go because, my mom wouldn't let me in school for nothing. So she beat me before. I don't know. I could be like dead on the street. She'd like pick me up, put me in the classroom and be like, get up. And I'm like, okay. But by God's grace, my mom let me go. And that was the first time that I'd really like heard the gospel. So again, I'd heard it through music, I'd heard it through people sharing it with me, I'd heard it even when I was younger, like at certain church services that people would take me to. But at that winter retreat, that was the first time I really heard, and I was like, okay, Jesus really might be who he says that he is. And
it was the first time that it clicked.
Right. And again, it's kind of cool thinking about that. I don't know, I just get encouraged because, and even like the way that I like now counsel folks, or I have to remind myself of whenever sharing the gospel with folks, is like, listen, sometimes it takes a while. And I mean, even so, like the Kitchens, they're the people that, like my first friends, whenever I came to America, it wasn't until I was in college, and I literally I was in high school. It might have been that summer, but I literally reached out to them and was like, hey, thank y'all for being a witness for Jesus. Like,
that's so cool.
Yeah, and it's like, that was 6 years later,
Yeah.
right? They didn't know.
Yeah, true.
Which is just really cool. So, all that to say, I think that's kind of the moment where the Lord had really just kind of changed my heart. And again, I try to be careful with like time in a day because I think we can get overly fixated on that.
Yeah.
But the whole time, the Lord was slowly drawing me to Himself over those years, and which is cool. And then I ended up getting mentorship by a guy named Jonathan. He ended up leaving that church on like good premise, but his dad was a successful business owner. He wanted to start a restaurant. Me and my boys basically helped him build that restaurant. But there was a lot of discipleship that happened, and we would work through what the Word was, work through different books. I remember reading through the book of James. I remember reading through the book of Romans, and my mom would drop me off at the restaurant. And one day I was reading Romans 8, and I don't know, it was just a really cool moment I was thinking through. But again, like I'd already been a Christian at this point, but I was reading Romans 8:1. It says, There's therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Yeah. And I was in like a little rolly chair, and I was just like, hold up. And, Jonathan, by this time, he still had like 10, 15 minutes before he got to the place. And I was just like reading, thinking about that. And by the time that he walked in the door, I was like, bro, have you read this before? He's like, yes, yeah. I have. I'm like, this is awesome.
That's so funny.
Yeah, no, it's just really cool. And it was just, the Lord had just really, I guess, impressed at that moment a high view of the Word and spending time there, and was really encouraged there. But anyway. The rest was kind of a process. It's a continued life process, but I had a lot of mentors along the way.
It's a lifetime process of getting to know the Lord. And I feel like it's cool that, one of the reasons that your mom might have agreed of you going is because it was like a Christian camp. Yeah. And even though she doesn't really believe in the Lord, like, people in general have the mindset of like, oh, it's a Christian camp. They're going to help, like, my kid get better.
Help straighten these kids.
So, like, even though she doesn't believe, technically, she doesn't, like, follow the Lord, something in her told her, like, yeah, this will be good for my son. Right. So I think it's so cool that happens with people that say that they don't believe the Lord. Right. I think that's very interesting. Yeah. And I asked you this before, but when did you start wrestling, and have you played any other sports before?
I started... It's actually funny because, like, as I'm answering, I'm like, did I already say this? Yeah. Which is totally fine. But, so I started wrestling in my freshman year of high school, and I did not play any sports before that. I always wanted to, and football was kind of like the big thing. I mean, actually, even coming up here to Kentucky, I was shocked at how much people like basketball. Cause I'm That's true. Right? Because, like, down south, I mean, it's football. That's everything. Anyway, so I really wanted to play, and my dad actually wouldn't let me. He was like, you're too small, and I was like, whatever. When you say
you're too small, to me it's so weird. Because we don't have football in Brazil.
Oh, really?
But obviously, I know the football guys in here, and they're big.
They're pretty big.
But still, like, it's funny how people, like, have this stereotype, like, in their minds, like, yeah, I don't think you would be fit for that sport because of your body type. Right. But like, in some sports, sure, you can influence, and football is one of those. Yeah. But it's just funny how much, like, people take it into consideration here. Right. It's that serious.
It's so serious.
Yeah.
But again, like, down south, football is like a religion, you know what I mean? And everybody's goal is to make it to the league, so... but yeah, I started wrestling in high school, and which is pretty young. I mentioned this earlier, but whenever I first came to college, one of my teammates, he was either 22 or 23. He was a little older, but he had started wrestling whenever he was 4. So he had wrestled as long as I was alive, which is a big deal. And again, the skill gap was pretty big at that point. I mean, obviously we made it to college, but he was really good. But anyway.
Yeah, but for you, like, coming like from high school wrestling to college wrestling, what were, like, one of the biggest challenges for you?
It was a world of difference. Oh my goodness.
How come? Like, I don't know what changed.
Oh my goodness.
Because I will never experience that in my life, so I don't know.
Yeah, wrestling's awesome. Oh my gosh. I thought I was ready. It was,
That's funny.
I mean, like, in high school, we had a pretty competitive room, but, like, high school accolades just don't matter in college. Yeah. So, like, I mean, like, I wasn't a state champ or anything like that, but when I came here, it was like, one, I'm wrestling grown men.
Yeah. Like that guy that was 22 years old.
Right. Like, as a grown man.
Yeah.
I was 18 and I was young for my age. So, like, there was a legitimate, like, physical development that still needed to happen.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't until my sophomore year that I really started filling in. So there was that piece. The competition was just significantly different. I mean, I say this story now. I used to be super ashamed of it, but here we are. The Lord humbles us. You know, I came in and I was like, I'm finna take everybody's spot. Like, I'm about to beat everybody, right? And I mean, to some degree, you need to have that in a sport.
Yeah, you need
like
to have
that.
the confidence.
Right, but there's also a difference between, like, confidence and foolishness. Mine was foolishness. Like, the person who was in my weight class was a national qualifier. Like, he wasn't no chump. But so we used to do these things called grind matches, and it's basically wrestling for an extended period of time. And we did a 40-minute grind match, and you know, for 35 or so out of those 40 minutes, I was probably on my back or getting choked out or, like, just getting destroyed. And I remember, like, I tried to quit. I was like, bro, get off me. And he's like, no.
My gosh.
And, like, I couldn't get him off me. So I was like, well, shoot, I guess I have to wrestle.
I'm just gonna lay here.
Right. But, like, you know, it's actually cool because the reason why I like sharing that now is because, like, yeah, there's just a really cool moment that happened afterwards. But now one of my best friends, his name's Freeman. If you're into wrestling at all, you should check him out. He's a Greco guy. But he came up to me afterwards. He's like, man, I never thought I'd hear that from your mouth. I better never hear that again.
Dang.
And I didn't. So I guess like
good.
Yeah. And I mean, like, one of the differences that happened coming from high school to college is that there was like a realization that it's like, yo, like, we're not like it's not a joke anymore. Like, it's high level competition, and there's a different mindset that comes with it. So don't be a punk, basically. Yeah, I mean that was kind of fundamentally it. But yeah, I learned a lot, grew a lot, was beat a lot, and I think that's just part of the process. So it's like, how do you have that resiliency to keep going after that? Yeah, so that was kind of one of the biggest challenges. I think just the competition, and like, everybody's fast, everybody's strong, and everybody's good. So, like, in high school, you'd be like, oh, I'm about to just throw this kid on his back and pin him in like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
You just didn't have that in college.
It didn't happen here.
Like, you're wrestling 7 minutes, right? Like, the full match, like, was the expectation.
It's a long time.
Yeah, so, but it was good because, and I mean, I might talk about this later, but it's just a matter of, like, shifting the expectation. The expectation I had was to come in here and to be a stud and to beat everybody. But in reality, I was like, I needed to be humbled because every single person in here is good. And they were really putting hands on folks. And but it's good because we had like, at that time, we weren't as competitive as we became. But, like...
Yeah, the wrestling team is good.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, we have a pretty competitive program, and it's not for everyone.
Oh, yeah.
So.
It's tough for sure. And, like, in Brazil, it's not that common to see people wrestling.
Yeah.
But when I watched for the first time, I was like, this is the funniest and, like, hardest thing I've ever seen in my life. Because you guys use, like, 100% of your strength. Almost like those 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. Like, to me, it's so funny because you are all over each other.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't know how you guys handle that because it's so sweaty and, like, there's
actually a lot of technique in there.
Oh, of course it is.
You're not just like...
No, of course. I bet it is. But, like, I have no clue what's going on.
Yeah.
But that is so hard. But, like, sometimes I remember going with Molly, and Molly was one of my best friends. And, like, me and her were laughing the whole time of, like, how nervous we were watching, how funny it was. So, yeah, it's a good sport. It's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone.
I can say that.
It's not for
Especially
everyone.
from someone that has never, like, competitively played, like, any, like, physical contact sport. Because I've danced, or I play tennis, or now I'm running track.
Right.
There's no touching anyone.
Yeah.
At no time. So, I don't know if I would have been able to handle that. I would be annoyed, honestly.
It's pretty cool. I think it gives you kind of a chip on your shoulder too, because it's like, I don't know. I just think it brings a unique set of challenges, but like, it's
really
fun.
Is.
Yeah, I mean, I say that now looking back, but like, cutting weight sucked. Like, there was a lot of, but I mean, like, it's part of it, and you just realize everybody cuts weight, and like, everybody goes through that similar kind of suck, and like, it's just part of it. So
that is true.
Yeah. It's not for everyone.
And shifting, like, from the perspective of doing it because you really love the sport, because it's like an idol in a way, how did you feel after you started doing it for God and to glorify God?
Yeah. So I mean that I didn't like consciously think about using wrestling as a means to glorify the Lord probably until college. And again, I think some of that was just maturity in Christ, right? Like I was a new believer, and I knew that following Jesus meant following him everywhere. But I think in my mind I was like, oh yeah, like I'm just gonna be a Christian, I'm just gonna do my thing at practice, and then I'm gonna do my thing at competition. But coming to college, I think I was just more confronted with that because a lot more of my teammates just either weren't Christians or they were asking questions and different things like that. But I just became a little bit more conscious of the fact that like Christians are called to be ambassadors for Christ, and that the way that we do things matters. And if you think about an ambassador for Brazil, like if you were an ambassador for Brazil now, I would assume, for better or for worse, that like what you're doing is going to be representative of people in Brazil. So in the same way as we think about being an ambassador for Christ, like what people see to some degree is going to be some kind of reflection on the Lord as well. Now that doesn't mean that we're advocating for perfection, because that's not it at all. And I was mentioning the last time too, like, so the way that we win matters, the way that we conduct ourselves matters, the way that we pursue holiness matters, but also the way that we fail matters. And like, again, I think of that one situation where I got absolutely handled, but it's like, okay, like that's a humility piece. Now onto the athletic piece, you can have the piece where it's like, no, like I'm not gonna get punked out like that. But then there's the other piece too where it's like, all right, cool, like I have a lot to grow and I have a lot to learn. So, and I guess I'm just thinking about the importance of like how when we fail, that's also a picture of God's grace in our life. And because I think sometimes we can have this perception where Christians need to do everything perfectly. So when I'm saying I'm being an ambassador for Christ, I need to do that perfectly. And it's like, nah. Because if I get to a place where I need to apologize to somebody or repent to somebody or before the Lord, like that's also a means for people to see God's redemptive work in our lives, which is really cool. So.
And something that I didn't even like realize until I feel like months ago, I would say, like we're always influencing people.
Always.
Doesn't matter like if people are realizing that or like if we realize that, but people are always watching us as we're watching other people. So the way we conduct ourselves and like how we fail matters a lot, because as you said, like in sports, failing it happens all the time. So like we need to learn how to fail too,
right?
Which for me was such a struggle my whole life, because I'm such a perfectionist. So failing is one of my biggest fears, and I know that now, so I can handle it differently. Right. And just being an ambassador, I think is so cool, because I'm gonna be an ambassador for the school next year.
Okay.
So every time that you've been saying like ambassador, I'm like, yeah, that matters.
Right.
Because I wanna like give a good impression to those people that I'm gonna be talking to that might come to the school. So in the same way, the way we act in our sports and outside of sports, like our teammates are gonna watch us, and
for better or for worse.
Yeah, literally.
Like it's just the reality of it, and
as you said, like we're not perfect, but the way we do things, it's supposed to be for God, to glorify God.
Right.
So I think that's very cool when you use the word ambassador. I never thought about using that word.
That's from
it's so cool.
Yeah,
read it.
If I just read it. It's literally one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture. 2 Corinthians 5. Start verse 16. From now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the flesh. Even though we once regarded Christ according to the flesh, we regard him thus no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. All this is from God, who through Christ reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. So we implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. And then here's a really cool verse that's like a summary of the gospel. For our sake, God made him, to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him, in Christ, we might become the righteousness of God.
Preach! Yeah. That's so cool.
It's so good. It's so good. And it's like, in our sports, we have the opportunity to be ambassadors too. And yeah.
And it's every day. That's what is so cool. We're together like all the time with our teammates. Right. And you, as someone that worked with athletes a bunch, as like, not only like as a sports ministry as like leader, but also as the director, as the GA, or like
Yeah.
any other like setting here at the school, because I don't know, maybe like 50% of our students are athletes, so
Right.
or even
It's a
more.
lot.
I don't even know. So it's a lot. So what are some things that you've seen that athletes struggle with the most, and what
Yeah.
are some pieces of advice that you could give to those people that struggle with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still stumped up on this one.
It's fine. Oh, by the way, I've asked this before. But
That's
it's a
so
hard
good.
question.
It
No,
is
that's
a
why
hard
I asked
question.
it.
That's a hard question. It's good though. Yeah, I think I'll stick with the first one. But yeah, just kind of talking about how in sports everything that we do is performance driven. So not the only, sometimes depending on your coach. The majority of the time that that we get complimented or that we get affirmed is whenever we do things right or whenever we perform well.
True.
So then the expectation can be, well, success means performing well or doing well, becoming a national champ or an All-American or whatever that might be. So the danger, though, comes is whenever you begin to translate that into the Christian life, because now Christianity becomes performance-driven. And rather than looking at Christ, who has accomplished the work, right? I mean, going back to this, God made him who knew no sin to be sin, so that in him, not in ourselves, in him, we can become the righteousness of God. What we can begin to do is put that burden on ourselves.
Yeah.
So whether that's, within the Christian walk, the way that we engage people, the way that we share the gospel, whatever it is, we can begin to put like a burden on ourselves rather than looking to Christ, who has accomplished it all. Now, again, that's not me saying that we need to be passive. I think that, Christ's love compels us, right, to be able to pursue holy lives and to love our neighbor and to love the Lord. But if we're not careful, I think, again, we can just begin to have a performance-driven mind within our Christian walk. And then we can struggle because, and I mentioned this earlier too, but like the reason why we get into the Word is because we confess and we believe that God has revealed himself to us ultimately through the Lord Jesus Christ, but also in his Word. So like the capital W word, Jesus, but then also in his Word. And so it's like the reason why we should get into the Word is to know God.
Yeah.
Not just to check off a box. And sometimes we can have this systematic approach, which systematic's not bad, but like we can have this overly rigid approach where it's like, okay, I need to check the box, just get in the Word right now. And then God forbid if I fail, then, oh my goodness, I'm a failure. And it's like, no, I mean, there's grace for that, right?
Because we're humans.
Right, we're humans. And we're constantly in the process of becoming more like Jesus. So it's actually funny because a lot of the same mindset that athletes will take towards their craft, towards their sport, we don't actually apply like the benefit of that to our walk either. And what I mean by that is like,
that's cool.
Okay, so we realize that, I'm not going to become a good wrestler in a day. I'm not going to win a national championship in a day.
Nope.
I realize that it's going to take me eating well. It's going to take me disciplining myself in sleep.
That is a struggle for so many people.
I know.
I can say that.
Listen, and it matters.
Oh, it does.
It matters. Like, sleep matters. So I'm going to discipline myself in what I eat. I'm going to discipline myself in my sleep. I'm going to discipline myself in my practice. Like, I'm not going to compromise, and just because I don't feel good, like, oh, let me cut corners. Like, no. Like, national champions, they don't cut those corners. But then, whenever we think about the Christian life, it's like, oh, okay, I should do this once, and immediately I should become a national champion. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. It's a process. So on one hand, like, on one hand, we can either put a burden on ourselves, but then on the other hand, we can also just have unrealistic expectations. So that would be one of the difficulties that I see and that I struggled with. And, in different ways, I'm not competing, but in different ways still struggle with. Another thing I would say is just like, I often saw the difficulty that people would have with engaging their teammates. Sometimes the attitude was, yo, like, I'm going to keep my teammates over here, and I'm going to just, like, share the gospel with you afar. But, and, with sports ministry, the key verse was 1 Thessalonians 2:8, which says this. It says, so, being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you had become very dear to us. And then, Paul gives us, I think the Bible gives us the challenge where, we get to not only share the gospel with people, but also our very lives. So, just as we think about some of the difficulty of engaging people who are either culturally different than us, maybe there's actually like a language barrier, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But then the challenge is, okay, well, how do we go about loving these people, as my teammates that I have the opportunity to spend a lot of time with.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think I have already mentioned this in the podcast. I don't know, I say this phrase a lot, but one of the pastors back at home said once that if we are the only image of Jesus they will ever see, what do they see?
Yeah.
And like when he said that stuck to me a lot, because that is actually true.
It's good.
Sometimes people will never hear about Jesus unless like we show it to them or we talk about Jesus to them.
Right.
So what we're showing to people matters a lot.
It matters.
And I've mentioned this before, like in other episodes too, and before we restarted this episode.
Hey, there's a grace for that.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
That on a tennis team, that was a big struggle for me to be able to go and talk about Jesus to them, because it wasn't a good environment for me to do that. People were not very receptive. The coach never really talked about this. But now on the track team, it's way easier because the coach intentionally goes and give us like devotions. We have like other athletes that go and talk to the whole team because we have team meetings every single Wednesday. So we talk about Jesus like explicitly, and we are mostly Americans on the team. So around here, especially in the Bible Belt, people have heard about God at least like once or twice, and they have been to church. Doesn't matter if they have a relationship with God or not, they've heard about him. So it's easier in a way. There are other types of what's the word?
It's like different kinds of folks who may not have, or different cultures. Or...
True, and there are challenges in both situations,
right.
But I feel like by sharing the gospel, the situation that I am in now is easier. Yeah. Yeah, and you are not practicing any sports anymore, and what was retired? And what were some of the biggest struggles for you after you stopped competing? Because I bet it's so hard.
You know, it's actually funny. I'm really passionate about this because nobody talks about this.
That's true.
That's actually not true. People do talk about this.
In general, it's not heard a lot. That is true. I agree with that.
So in The Assist, there's a book, if you're interested.
That book's so good.
It's so good. It's called The Assist, and then the subtitle is... what is a practical guide in glorifying God through your sports. It's really helpful. But one of the chapters that it has is called On Retiring.
After I read that book, like, I started to think about it, because, like, I've never even thought about the fact that one day I'm not going to be competing all the time.
Right.
Like, doesn't matter what sport you do.
Yeah.
So that hit me hard. I was like, oh, dang.
Yeah.
How is it?
No, it's and I guess it is a good thing to think about, because my retirement was kind of abrupt. I ended up shattering my ring finger my freshman year. I wrestled my sophomore year. But again, I was revisiting the idea of military or federal law enforcement, and it's on my left hand. My ring finger on my left hand is what broke, and I'm left hand dominant. Oh. So fun. I was like, I shoot with my left hand. And basically the doctor was like, if you do any more damage to your finger, it's just going to get stuck. Oh, fun. And I was like, I kind of need my hand. So, anyway, but... It was one of those things where mine was a little bit more abrupt, so I don't think I had as much closure. But one of the things that I struggle with is like still wanting to have that high of a competition. So I mean, like I would still work out, and then to some degree too, I was pursuing special operations in the military, so I was like working out for that, which was really fun.
I bet it's hard, but
it was hard.
I also bet it's fun.
But it's good, and it's like that helps satisfy some of that competitive element.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a struggle, is like readjusting to, okay, like where do I get that competition? But then even like the point of working out, like why? Because beforehand there's a clear goal. I want to get faster, I want to get stronger, and I want to be more conditioned so I can be a better wrestler. Ultimately, so I can glorify the Lord through that, but also for my teammates, because I don't, like I want to be a good teammate there too, and I want to be a competitive and a successful wrestler. Yeah. So there was a goal towards working out. Afterwards, like you're like, well, why do I do this? I
think that's gonna be the biggest struggle for me.
It's hard, and it's easy to be like, I don't really need to, but then it's like, okay, let me continue to be disciplined, which moves me to another challenge that I had with wrestling, or with any sport, especially on the collegiate level. Your life is structured around your sport to some degree. Literally. Like you have morning practices, you eat. You have class, you eat. You have afternoon practice, you eat. And then you go do homework maybe, and then go to sleep. Maybe you should. But it's like it was just super structured. So losing some of that structure and losing the accountability of it was really difficult. So that I would say, make time to discipline yourself, to like to
That's good.
yeah, just to find things that actually fill that time. Because if not, you're gonna have too much time, and then you're not gonna do anything. So discipline is actually a good thing. Structure is a good thing. We sometimes think like, oh, freedom is not doing anything, but like true freedom happens within appropriate, boundaries, and that's why like true freedom is found by submitting ourselves to the word of the Lord. It's not by doing whatever we want. That's what the whole book of Judges is, and it was horrible. Right? And like people were doing what was right in their own eyes, and they thought they were free, but like it was horrible, and they were killing themselves. And
literally.
Right, I mean, actually, yeah, like it was horrible. So thinking through that, like having good balanced structure is good. But then another thing, and again, this is on retirement, but just I think I really struggled for a while because I was like a lot of my identity still wanted to be being a wrestler, and I wasn't that anymore. So it's like, okay, I used to be known as Devon who wrestled. I don't do that now. So what's up? And
I bet it's hard.
yeah, I mean, like it's just different. But then again, that like some of that challenges where it's like, no, like our identity is in Christ.
Yeah.
Like Devon the Christian who wrestles. Yeah. So again, I think I was just more confronted with the fact that I wanted to hold on to wrestling more than I thought I did. And it was actually funny because I read that book 4 years after I stopped competing.
Wow.
And when I read that chapter, I was like, dang, like I'm still like kind of holding on to this, right? Years later. And like in I don't know what's like in Brazil, but in high school here, you kind of make fun of people who like live their glory days in high school. Right, and it's like, well, back in high school, and it's like, bro, nobody cares about that.
True.
But it's easy to want to like hold on. Like, I can see why people do that.
Because it is part of you.
It's part of you.
It is.
And like that was a big part of what like who you are, what you did, what gave you value, what gave you worth. So then the question is, well, how do we transition that to getting our value, worth, and our identity in Christ? Yeah, which can be difficult sometimes because the physical, like the competitive piece is a lot more tangible, and you could be like, yeah, like I'm serving the Lord, I'm following Him, like I'm identified with Him. But if you don't see those like tangible results, sometimes it could be easier to go to the things where you can see those results right there.
True.
And you're like, see, look, I got these medals, right?
Yeah, true.
So.
Yeah, I feel like especially for like group sports, like team sports, like wrestling as well, like you need someone else to wrestle with. You can't like do it by yourself.
I did that for a while. I had a throwing dummy.
That's funny. But like for tennis, for example, you can still play tennis.
Right.
You go to a court. You like call a friend. You can go and play. But wrestling, it's harder to find someone to wrestle with.
So you want to roll around? Like, no. Okay.
That's not that easy. Like running, you can run.
Yeah.
You don't need anyone to run.
Right.
But like the competitive part, or like having the goal-driven mindset, because like after you stop competing,
it's like, what do you do?
Yeah, like I bet it's so hard.
Yeah.
And just like, especially like now, like they were going to like the summer vacation part.
Yeah.
Like all the workouts, obviously, they are still like goal-driven. Like it's like for a purpose, for the season that is gonna come. But it's still so much harder to be motivated to go and like work out when like that like the only competition that is gonna come is like months from now. So it's hard. I feel like that's like a close maybe like mindset. Or like when I stopped playing tennis and I started track, it was hard for me. Like after I left the meeting that I had with my past coach, I was crying on the phone with my parents. Like I was so happy that I quit, but I was also so sad because like it's not that I didn't like tennis anymore. It just couldn't do that here anymore. So I was crying to them, and my dad was like, "Aren't you happy that you made this decision?" Like, no, I am, but like still, I've been playing for like 8 years.
Right.
So like it's part of me that like I won't have anymore.
Right.
I can still like sign up for like a championship, but still it's not gonna be the same. So I'm never gonna have that part of my life anymore. So like I feel like what's the word? When someone dies and you
like the closure?
Not closure, like when you mourn. Like the mourning, it's real too.
Yeah.
And especially when you like completely stop practicing a sport and competing in that sport. I bet it's so hard.
It's tough. And honestly, I think, for Americans and some other Western cultures, we just don't value lamenting or mourning.
True.
And I'm thinking more specifically about like biblical context, but like, you know, if there was repentance of sin, there'd be like a tearing of robes, sackcloth and dust ashes. Like, it was very public, and like it was like a big deal.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I mean, I think some of the yeah, it's interesting because part of me, I'm like, okay, I think for the most part, there are a lot of things in life where like we just need to stop complaining and just kind of suck it up. But that can also go too far, because like that's one of those things where it's like, no, like we actually should mourn that. Like, that's a mournable thing.
Yeah.
But the question is, do we just stay in that mourning piece?
Yeah.
Or do we move on past that? Because like I think it's a good thing to get that closure, to mourn, to process that, especially emotionally process that. And yeah, like the Lord sanctifies whole people. That includes our emotions too, right? So like our emotions are part of
the Lord cares,
right,
about how we feel.
He does, and it's like our emotions are part of who we are too. So so like it's appropriate to mourn, to grieve, to process all that. And I think often that's one of those things where it's like, oh, just kind of suck it up, like it's over.
Yeah.
But it's like, but yo, I just spent. I mean, I think of my buddy Sam, and he's like, yo, I just spent 26 years of my life wrestling.
Literally.
You know.
That is insane.
Or 22. But it's like, I just spent 22 years of my life wrestling. Like, what? Like, you know, he's been wrestling legitimately for like almost all of his life.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
All his life.
Right. Like, that's a big deal. And I mean, some of it depends on how invested you are in your sport too. Because I know some people who like they're like, whatever, I don't care. I'm super glad I don't do this anymore.
I don't know how people.
Right. But I think for me, because wrestling gave me opportunities to come to college. It gave me opportunities to do things like. If I wouldn't have wrestled, I'm convinced, like looking back and seeing how the Lord has shaped it and molded my life, like if I wouldn't have wrestled, I don't know where I'd be. Legitimately. Like, I'd probably be off wilding out in the gang or something. Like,
that is actually crazy.
Like, I wouldn't have done anything productive, you know? And I mean, I don't know that, because here we are, by God's grace. But yeah, so it's like whenever that kind of attachment comes to it as well, it's like, okay, this is a big deal.
It is. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, so what can you say was one of your favorite memories of sports so far?
Oh, snap.
You can say more than one.
It's really ironic because my favorite memories were the worst at the time. Because now I look back and I'm just
I've been like hearing a bunch of like similar experiences, but go ahead.
Man.
Oh gosh.
I honestly think like I had a few pivotal moments in terms of my mindset that are some of my favorite, and one was whenever I was wrestling that grind match, because again, Freeman that was really good. There was another one, and again, I think that this is just because it helped cultivate a different kind of competition for me, and I'm really grateful for that. But there was another piece. We were running sprints at the end of practice, and everybody knows the whole like, look at me, I'm so tired kind of look that people have. So I did that, and my coach.
Oh gosh.
This is my first coach. There've been a few coaches in Cumberlands history, but he literally, like, I ran down on the mat, touched the mat, and I was running back, and he literally like locks eyes with me and looks at me the whole time, and he's like, "Get that stupid look off your face. No one gives an F that you're tired." And I was like,
and
I literally got back to the end, and I was like, yo, that's true. Like we're all, but I think
we're all tired,
right? And I think that was one of the reasons, because that, I mean, it really gave me perspective on like, yo, like my whole team is here doing this with me. Like, it's not just me. That's cool. Like I don't just need to make this about myself and look at how much I'm struggling, but like my whole team's going through this. Like, we're grinding out here. So kind of in like a weird, ironic way, that's actually one of my favorite memories too. But
that's so cool.
I don't know. We had a lot of really hard practices. They're just not, like, I guess it's just funny to me how those are my favorite ones now. And I think some of it is because it's like, dang, like if I did that practice right now, could I do that? You know?
Yeah, true.
And I mean, the prideful part of me, I'm like, duh. But the other piece is like, man, that really sucked. Anyway, I don't have to go into details about it, but yeah, those are just some of my favorite memories. In terms of like actual practice, but and maybe more like self shaping, because again, I think one of the things I appreciated about the sport so much is how much the Lord has used it to kind of shape and kind of develop me. But maybe some other things, I mean, I really would say just my engagement with the teams, just my different teammates. And honestly, as we've been talking through this, I've been thinking about one. There was a guy, we were teammates for my first 2 years here, and he ended up graduating, but recently he called me, like his mom wasn't doing super well. And I think having developed some of those relationships to the point, I mean, literally he calls me out of nowhere. I've not talked to him in like 3 years. And he was like, bro, I didn't know who else to talk to. Like,
wow, that's
like, here's
huge.
what's going on. Yeah, and I was like, I don't know. I was really reflective, and I was like, man, that was really cool. So I guess being able to like have those kind of moments and conversations and go back to like the sucky practices, but like yo, like we really did that, you know?
Yeah.
And just how bonding that those actually were. Yeah, so I mean those would be like the personal character development, the relationship and friendships that were made, that have even carried on till now. Like that was just a cool thing. I think is really cool. Yeah.
And obviously everything that we talked to. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was like, I don't know how I forgot about this. Man, the Lord's so good. My second year wrestling here, I had a coach. His name was Cal, and he was a GA, but he was awesome, and he was just a really cool mentor, good friend ultimately, but Christian, and he was actually one. He was like, man, like we should read through the Bible in a year together, and I'd never done that before, but I just remember being really challenged by that and really encouraged and edified by having done that with him. So that would probably be another one of my favorite memories.
That is very cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of growth that happened with him. It's crazy the impact and the influence that an intentional coach can have on you.
Oh yeah.
You know.
I know.
Yeah, right. So like it's just it's really cool.
Yeah, it was very different, like, because at home I had like all my coaches were Christians too, and like we didn't even know about this like when we started like practicing on that place and in that club. Like we had no idea, but like obviously like God's character will show. And like I found out that like all my coaches were literally Christians. I was like, that is awesome. Like awesome. What an opportunity. And then coming here, that was like one of the biggest changes. Because Coach Dan, he's an awesome man, but he doesn't like intentionally follow the Lord. So that was very different. And now with Coach Souder, it's completely different as well. Because he's dealing with like 130 athletes.
It's a lot of people.
He is doing a great job. That is a lot of people to manage. But yeah. We've been talking basically about like sports and God through how because I just remembered about a question that I want to ask.
Oh yeah.
That we've been talking about God and sports like throughout the whole episode, obviously. But what are some things?
Sorry, it just started pouring the rain.
Really? That is funny. I could show you guys, but if I change the setting, I might not be able to put it back where it is.
Just trust us.
It's a lot of rain.
It's raining hard.
Can I get a ride?
Yeah.
Because I don't know what I want. That's funny. That is a lot of rain.
Okay.
Anyways.
We talk a lot about God.
What are some things that sports has taught you about God?
About God?
Yeah. About God's character or God in general. It's a lot of freaking rain.
Leaves.
Oh gosh.
You know, it is interesting. I think to some degree there were some practices and stuff where I was like really relying on the Lord. So, I mean, I guess kind of a cliche, but really the Lord's faithfulness in that. I'd also say, like, it's cool in a weird kind of way. I think that maybe not weird. I guess in a cool way, the Lord has taught me a lot about His providence, His sovereign control.
True.
Because again, I mean, I really think back on some of those conversations, those moments, or some of those things that were like really pivotal in shaping just me, or even some of my other teammates. And it's like, it's just cool that sports was the means that He used to kind of instill those things. So yeah, His faithfulness, His sovereignty. Wow.
I'm gonna show this. I don't care.
It's like.
So if you're watching on YouTube, that's the situation outside.
No, that came out of it was like just sunny.
It really was.
It was just sunny. That's crazy.
That is a lot of rain. Anyways,
okay.
I'm gonna put it right here. Go ahead.
All right.
Wait. The battery's ending. Come on.
There it is.
We need to finish this.
yeah, so yeah, I think sports just kind of taught me a lot about that. Just reliance on him, his faithfulness, his sovereignty. And I don't know, I'm just really grateful for a lot of my teammates and just the opportunity to have talked and engaged with them too. Even some that, whether or not like the conversations were a little more like difficult to navigate or whatever it might be, but there was just a lot, that the Lord has taught me through that. Yeah. Through sports and
That's
through that.
so cool. Yeah, Devon.
So.
Thank you so much for coming to the podcast. This was a journey.
So was the Christian walk.
It was a crazy ride. Oh, yeah. It really is.
Come on.
Good job. Yeah, thank you guys so much for spending your time to listen to us talk about sports and about the Lord. I hope you could have been blessed by it. Yeah. And I have fun. I think the board had fun too.
This is great.
And I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.
Peace.
Bye.